Good afternoon. This is Malar signing in from Hearts&Minds Development Center again. Thank you for your patience. We got a little bit delayed because, as usual, we had some technical glitches at the last minute. But by now we would have got used to all of these technical glitches and still trying to look cool so that we can introduce the guests for this week. So, for those who have joined us, please feel free to say hello so that I can welcome you personally. And I'm very sure that you are as excited as I am to meet this wonderful friend of mine, new friend. I was just telling him I don't really know him, but met Darrel some years ago. I was introduced by a common friend. Hi, Louis. And he has this amazing way of kicking you or slapping you without knowing that he's slapping you. So I am a little bit anxious to meet him. All right. But have your questions. As you know, we are bringing you this Being Whole, Be Me series. And today we are very, very happy to have Darrel Lourdes, who's going to talk to us about things that really matter to us, family. And without much ado, let's bring on Darrel Lourdes. Hey!
Hey. Hi, Mala.
Hi. So all the serious stuff I said about you, Darrel.
It's okay. Once they hear this, they'll know I'm not too serious.
Okay, nice to know. So I just needed to tell people, how powerful you are. But before that, let me just welcome a couple of really good friends who are always supporting us. Hi, Louis Marias, Gerald. Of course, he was our father of the week last week. Jonathan Renu, so good to see you. Elizabeth, my dearest friend. Alia is here. Alia is the co-founder of Y House. So be nice to her, Darrel. So don't say anything nasty about her, okay? And Casey Fanindan, thank you very much. Pal is here. Don't play. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us in our Being Whole, Being Me series. Now, without much ado, let's talk to Darrel. So, Darrel, so the way we got people in today is this. We are very curious to know when you had this really successful career that most of us would die for, which is the HR director of Shell, right? Now, why would someone who has this very successful career decide to pursue his career in counseling and therapy? I mean, I want to ask you what's wrong with you, but I'm not going to do that because people will kill me. So tell me your story.
Um, so, yeah, you start with a hard question. Yeah. So, I think the career with Shell, and before that was Intel, right? So 12 years in Intel, 8 years in Shell, 3 years in Hong Kong before that. Was a good part of my life. But, after 25 years of doing more or less the same thing, right, HR, you kind of start looking for something different, and my own journey into counseling came from a restlessness that I felt after many years of doing HR, and a search to kind of find something more fulfilling. And I think the turning point was in 2011. I was working in Holland with Shell, the headquarters there, and my father fell ill. So I came back to Malaysia and I spent 2.5 years with a person who was dying. And he passed on after 2.5 years. But in that period, it was a very good time of conversation, soulfulness, family time. And I think the reflection that developed during that time was life doesn't go on forever. So the last 5 weeks of his life, I was with him at palliative, staying with him in Mount Meriam in Penang. And, you kind of come to a very clear realization as you see life slipping out of someone that your own life doesn't go on forever. So I felt I really needed to do something with my restlessness. So 3 months later, I resigned, not knowing what I was going to do. I took the kids out of school and the family just went backpacking for a year. And during that time, I thought, maybe I'll try counseling. So when I came back, I, started on a counseling journey, but it wasn't real until I came across family therapy. And I met Professor Endoffi. Our center is named after Professor Endoffi, an Italian, who's done family therapy for about 50 years. So I met Professor Endorfi, and one of the things Professor Endorfi told me is, this is not about restlessness with corporate life. There's a high chance in your own life someone asked you to do something impossible when you're a child, and there's unfinished business in you, and that unfinished business creates the restlessness that made you pursue this. So when he told me that, I kind of thought, for a change, Professor is talking nonsense, and I kind of went away quietly. But after about 2 weeks, suddenly, memories of my mother coming to me and asking me to mediate between she and my father whenever they had conflict, came to my mind, and, to some extent, maybe he was right? There was something in me. As a child, it was impossible to step up and help. I remember feeling anxious and restless at that time. But, maybe family therapy appeals to me because I know what it feels like to be a child in a house where, my parents generally got along, but, whenever they were in conflict, I think they didn't know how to solve their conflict. And for some reason, my mother came to me because I was very close to my father, asking me to mediate. And I think the pressure is too much for a child. And, and I think to some extent, I got drawn into family therapy because old voice was playing in my head, and now when I work with families, there's a part of me that feels deeply fulfilled. So I think that kind of gives you a summary, a short version of over a bottle of wine. I can tell you a longer version to that story, but for now, I think that should suffice. Yeah.
So do I take it seriously? The bottle of wine?
Yes, you do.
Okay, good. So this is the longest version I've heard, and it's I want to hear more. Right?
Okay.
I want to hear more because I really think it's interesting. I mean, I told you this, right? I hardly know you, but I know of the work that you've put in the short time that I've known, and every time I message you or I call you and I say, I have this friend and this is the issue and I don't know what to do about it. You've always taken them in, and you've always dedicated your time. And I know how much of dedication you have put with my friends, right? Which I'm very deeply grateful for, because in the line of work that I do, I can listen to people to where they're coming from. I can even probably identify from an EQ perspective to know where the emotional wounds are coming from. I think I have probably those skills, right? But I don't know how to guide them to heal, right? And that's when Darrel, you came into my life when I think I really needed to do my part, because now I feel very supported having you and Endolfi in my life, right? Because I'm able to tell my friends confidently when they come to me, go to Darrel, go to Endolfi, and I know that they've got the right help. And I think there's no better time for me to tell you that I'm very grateful to have met you, even though I don't know you. And all the praises that I have and respect I have for you has been with the commitment that I see that you give into the lives that you've worked with, right? And so I'm saying this here loudly because if any one of you want to get in touch with Darrel, I can bet my last penny that he is not the typical therapist who's going to expect you to come many times. He's going to kick you hard, ask you questions that you may not like. But I have seen, people having their issues resolved. I've seen, my friends coming back and sharing how, it was important for them to be able to look into the mirror, right? So thank you for that. I'll be haunting you from now onwards more because of the bottle of wine. But let's go back to your story, right? So it's interesting. We didn't. So you said you came back because your father was sick, and you spent a bit of time with him, and you discovered, spending time was important. Then you said something interesting, which I'm interested in. So I do this for selfish reasons too. So for me, you said you took your kids off school.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us a bit more about it, since we're going to go into family anyway. So so what was the thinking behind that decision, Darrel?
so it was coincidental, right? So my father passed away. It was 2014 at that time. It was the year my youngest son finished his O level, my second son finished his diploma, and my eldest son finished his degree. So if we were going to take a year off, that's the only opportunity life would give you, right? And so we kind of decided we'll take a year off. So we traveled through Turkey, traveled through Europe, and I think the more exotic one is we went from KL to Beijing by road. You know, took us a good 12 or 13 weeks to get to Beijing, and you know, it was a time where we kind of bonded as a family, but it also was a time to reflect on what I wanted to do, because I was quite clear I was restless for many years. Yeah, so you know what happens in a normal career, and this is a studied fact, right? People start off working for security, and once security is fulfilled, you're looking for satisfaction. But at some point, you know, satisfaction is also not enough. You want meaning in your life. And that's where it gets very complicated, because how do we find out what is meaningful for us? You know, and I think that process requires a level of reflection and introspection. And the 1 year of travel, while it was a lot of fun, it was also a time of reflecting, you know? And I did a lot of journaling. I wrote about all the things in the world that I enjoyed doing, and what was the thing I enjoyed doing the most. And two things appeared right at the top of the list. One was the family. I enjoyed the family. But I thought, look, you can't create a profession with your family at that time. So I gave up that idea. And then the second one I enjoyed a lot in my career was having deep conversations with people. Quite often they came in with a crisis at work, or a career crisis, or a personal crisis. And then we spent many hours chatting about it, right? So I said, this part I can turn into something. And so I decided to give counseling a try. But what happened is, while I was trying out counseling, I discovered one of the forms of counseling is family therapy, where you have the whole family in the room and you work with the whole family at the same time. And what I also discovered was, you know, family therapy seems to be more effective in solving the problems and making sure the problems don't come back. Because, you know, people, when you do individual counseling, you go back and you face your family, you know, and you know, the person again has all the different pressures that may be coming from his family system. Yeah, and in family therapy, you fix the environment, so to speak, so that the pathological condition that the person may be facing disappears. So, you know, what happened was, in the course of the search, you know, I managed to put the two things that are most interesting to me, family and counseling, into one kind of a box. So family therapy is the perfect thing for me, lah. You know, it came out as the most important thing in my reflection, and it's now become my profession.
I'm actually, if you get to watch this video, you must see how you are smiling as you say it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
it's just amazing to watch you, right? Like, just move and to see that on your face. Nice.
Yeah. People say when I speak about family therapy, I become very alive, and I think that's true. I
You
enjoy
like
it.
that, yeah. Because other times you're quite scary to talk to, right? Because you do, right? All right. So, if you see me, I'm taking notes because you're giving me all these technical words that I need to use back and sound as clever as you. Tell me, I like the fact that you say you were restless, and I hear this from people very often in the work I do, right? Actually, in conversations, I hear restlessness, right? Of course, for me, I always say, you know, it's about listening to my heart and being home with myself. So when I'm not restless, I'm at home with myself, all right? But how do people connect with what you say as restlessness? So if I'm listening to you right now, and if I'm listening to you right now and I'm thinking, maybe that's what, you know, I'm also feeling like Darrel, you know, I'm not feeling totally fulfilled, not feeling alive. I have everything, but no meaning, but I don't know what is missing. So how do they detect their restlessness?
You know, I think the main thing is pay attention to your feelings, right? Your your feelings are almost like a suitcase, right? So if you're feeling restless and you open this suitcase called restlessness, you may find many things inside the suitcase. If
Okay.
you're feeling angry and you
Mm,
open that suitcase, you find many things that are in there. Normally, an
mm,
emotion represents a story that is
mm,
unique to us. Yeah. So if we start paying attention to the different emotions we feel,
mm,
the chance of us becoming more authentic,
mm,
the chance of us discovering ourselves a bit more becomes a
mm.
lot higher. So, you know,
Right.
your clue is really just follow your emotions. Follow your emotions. I don't mean live your emotions fully. I mean, follow your emotions, meaning look at the emotions, treat it like it's a suitcase, open up the suitcase and examine what is the restlessness about? What's the story of the restlessness? And I think it's a good practice to talk to our emotions also, develop a certain distance, look at the restlessness and say, hey, restlessness, why are you here? What's your
Mm,
story to me? What
mm,
lessons do you want to teach me?
mm,
And as you hear the restlessness, it might lead you to your authentic self or a deeper place that will enable a certain amount of growth if you take the decisions that come with insights. Yeah.
mm,
Like, the awareness of my restlessness was there for a long time. Huh? But it took me a good, I would say, 6 or 7 years before I made a decision.
mm,
Yeah. Initially, when the restlessness came, I tried to ignore it because I'll look at my paycheck and say, look, this restlessness is not justified, right? But
mm.
after some time, that didn't work, right? So I started to pay attention to the restlessness, and my father's death made me become more serious about the restlessness.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I love what you're saying. I mean, of course, I don't know whether you saw me grinning away because you know and that's exactly one of those messages that we're trying to get across, that it's okay to feel, and okay to embrace all that we feel, and that will lead us to deeper connection with ourselves, right? And
Yeah.
that's what you're saying. So that's nice. So what you're saying is that if you have any of these feelings of what you call restlessness, for other people it might be other words, just look at it, talk to it, pay attention to it, have a relationship and find out what messages, what stories are residing within this emotion, and what does it need, right? What action do you need to take to resolve it,
Yeah.
is what you're. All right. Okay, great. Now, so tell me, I like what you said. You had restlessness, and then you tried.
Before you move from the last point, let me just add something. There is something called stages of life that also
Right.
happens under the emotions. Yeah. So, and the stages of life has to do with, there's something natural in us that keeps developing.
Mm,
So as a young person leaving your house, if you're 20 something
mm,
and you're leaving your family and starting work, the big challenge, the development stage there is to develop your identity. And
mm,
you take on this thing about developing your identity. In your 30s, you're kind of struggling with intimacy because you're starting a family. The career thing is right there in the background. And then, as you get a little bit older, this famous term that you have heard, right? Midlife crisis comes in. Yeah.
mm,
So the ability to work with your restlessness keeps increasing with time, because by the time you reach midlife, you
mm,
have enough. Hopefully you have some level of money in the bank, or at least your house loan is 80% paid up. Your children may have grown up and they no longer need you so much. So the ability to kind of launch into things that are more meaningful is more
mm,
common. So if you kind of look at people in general, having a second career or moving into a career that's more meaningful is quite
mm,
common for people later in life.
mm,
So it's not
mm,
what I did is not at all a unique phenomena. A lot of people kind of get to a stage where they say, look, there's enough. I don't need a bigger car. I don't need a bigger house. My children may not need my money so much, so I can take some risk and do something stupid, no, and and try out something new, right? So there is that. Beyond the restlessness that you follow, there's also a developmental cycle that is happening that overlays the restlessness. So it's good to look at both those events in life as you make decisions.
Yeah. So I'm just going to check in with you, because you meet a lot of people. You've met people in the corporate world. You're meeting a lot of people via the therapy work that you're doing, right? Do you meet people who are actually looking for meaning, even though they are, in a space where they may not need the finances as much as they really needed in much earlier in life, right? And not choosing to deal with their restlessness. Do you meet them?
You know, the most common feedback I got when I was going around shells telling people that I was leaving, to kind of pursue a different path in life, was people telling me, I wish I could do that too. Yeah, and it was a very interesting moment, because you realize a lot of people show up at work and they're doing a job and they're into the security that the job gives you. But they may not necessarily love what they're doing. They may not necessarily truly enjoy what they're doing. It's a job, yeah. And but people kind of accept that this is my lot in life. I'm going to just live this way. Too bad, yeah. And then they just go on. But I was really surprised by, I would say 1 in 2 people that I said bye to said something to the nature of, I wish I can do that, or at some point I will do it. That, and what was interesting is after 6 months, one of my own staff, left the company and became a nature photographer. And he was in his 50s, right? Yeah, and that's what he always wanted to do, but he never kind of pulled the trigger. And he contacted me after 6 months to say, hey, look, I'm doing it finally, and he kind of went on, right? So I guess a lot of people are restless, but whether they act on the restlessness is a very different story.
Sure. So again, because you said the reason I asked you the question, because you said that many people do, and I meet a lot of people who say things like, I wish I could do that too, It's, it's as if it is easy to make that choice, right? But it's not as difficult as well. So just to reiterate that, we feel restlessness, we may have choices, but it is only ourselves, only we can put our restlessness to rest by paying attention to it. And I think I just wanted to say that, number one. Number two, you said that, a lot of times, and I hear this too, because a lot of times this puzzles me, and people say, in the beginning stage of our lives, we say, I need to pay bills, so security is important, and we get it because it's really, really logical, right? But a lot of times, especially later stage in life, we keep upgrading our lives, right? Better car, better. So there's no way you can get out of the debt cycle if you don't make a decision, right? And so I wanted to ask, what's your viewpoint in terms of, does external security, whatever we say as external security, all right, has any direct connection with internal security?
I think money does buy happiness.
Sure.
Yeah, the quality of wine that you drink depends on how much money you have. Yeah, so there's definitely a correlation between happiness and money. Yeah, and the research used to say, up to, I think, about 2 or 3 years ago, the research said that, once you hit a certain point of income, the level of happiness stops. But newer research is disputing that. So the new research says, look, more money means more happiness. But the one thing money can't buy is meaning. And there's a big difference between happiness and meaning. Meaning is, sometimes you indulge in meaning even when it's painful, right? So someone like, Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela, their lives are tremendously painful. Yeah, the things that they had to go through, but it was tremendously meaningful. And I think there is a confusion between happiness and meaning. Meaning is, you kind of go to bed at night and you think your day was really worthwhile. You get up in the morning and you know that day is going to be worthwhile. But the day isn't easy, when you sit with people in therapy, it's not an easy day. You get people who show up and they're convinced that it's better to kill themselves, and you're sitting there trying to help them rethink what they're doing. You see families at war, especially if you do couple counseling. At some point, the level of hatred the couple may express to each other in the room is so intense, right? And you're holding that hatred for the couple. So these things are not easy, but it's tremendously meaningful. Yeah, so money is important. It can help you buy happiness. It does buy more happiness, I think, if you have more money. But at some point, as you grow, I guess as we grow older, now I'm betraying my age, but as you grow older, I guess, living a life that is meaningful starts becoming more important. And I think that's where the trade-off with money can happen. But you're also right, Mala, if you keep buying a bigger car, then it's endless, right? And globally, there's this phenomena where people are actually moving towards greater simplicity. Tiny houses are becoming more popular. Even staying in your van is becoming quite popular in European countries, right? Because people realize, look, if I keep pursuing a bigger house, then I will always sacrifice living a life of meaning, or a life that is more fulfilling with less money. And I guess each individual has to make the trade-off. But the journey wasn't easy, right? So when I first left, I tell you, the insecurity of not having a stable income the first 1 or 2 years was tremendous. I was tempted about 20 times to just give up the whole thing and go back to a corporate job, So you have to learn slowly to give up what you're used to in order to be born again, I guess.
Thank you. So I think your video is lagging a bit because you get frozen, but we can hear you.
Okay.
So people are going to miss looking at some of your beautiful expression as you talk about stuff, right? So I'm going to just go one step backward because even though Patpal has warned me, so I don't disagree that money is important for happiness, because I think a lot of the things, basic things right now, you can't acquire without money, right? But I think where the wine is concerned,
you can't even get therapy without money,
Exactly, right? But you can get friends, right? To listen to you. So while I'm not saying, so I agree with you, money is important, which is why I think, it's important people get fairly paid, well paid, minimum average, income is very good, especially for the underprivileged. I believe in all of that, right? But I'm not too sure about the wine now, because I come from a place where people drank very cheap wine and they were also very happy. So I just needed to add that, because they've never had the privilege of tasting better wine. So I think a lot of times when we, the marketing strategy is selling you the idea of happiness, which is associated to more expensive, more branding, and more money. And we're giving to that. But we're not saying that, oh, it's not more tasty, right? Yeah. But when we keep giving into that, there is going to be no end to meeting our needs, because someone else is going to say this is better quality because of this acquisition of taste, and then we keep going for it. But you continue to enjoy your wine. It's not about you. But I wanted to tell you that I can take you to a place in Buntong where people drink real cheap liquor, and they are such happy people.
Yeah, I have no doubt about that, but I think the question was, does it give you happiness? And I think, for me, it seems to say yes, and the data also is saying yes.
Yeah. No, I'm not saying it's no, but I wanted to put into context as to we all want better things. I mean, I want better things. In some areas we all want it, and there's something wrong wanting it. But I think what we don't think of is the trade-off, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm very happy that you had the 2.5 years with your father, right? Not everybody gets the chance to do that, right? And for me, especially with COVID, it's like, how many of us know that we have the next 5 to 10 years that we think we have to live the fulfilling life, right? And I think, and that's why the conversation on meaning and purpose becomes so important, right? So we have a lot of questions coming in for you.
Okay,
So,
go
and
ahead.
before people curse me, I'm going to get into this question. So, obviously, people are falling in love with you. Now, so I'm going to throw you some questions that people are asking, and let's see how to get with that, right? Thirukesan Padmanathan, yes. He said, Malar, a quick question. Has family therapy issues risen during this MCO or other times too?
It's a good question. So what we are noticing is families and couples, actually couple therapy has shot up. Yeah. And so has family therapy. So, you initially have what you call fault lines, that are there already. Fault lines like in an earthquake where the land breaks is always at the fault line. No, it doesn't break in other places. So the couples and families have the challenges that are already there. What the MCO has done is it's helped them face the challenge. So, couples who don't get along, the standard approach is both work very long hours. So then they are in the office for 10 or 12 hours. They don't have to face each other. And then they come home and life goes on, right? And unconsciously or consciously, they are aware that, look, I don't want to be in the same house with my husband, or I don't want to be in the same house with my wife. And in the weekends, one of them goes off to play golf for about the whole day, so you can minimize the contact time. But what's happened in the MCO is all that has been taken away. And so the intensity of the problem has increased. There's no way of triangulating work with your issue. And that has caused a level of challenge. In families, what's happened is, a lot of families has outsourced taking care of the kid to either the maid or the grandparents. Yeah. So now all of a sudden the mother is at home and she hates the way the grandparents are taking care of the kids, especially since the grandparents belong to the father, the husband's grandparents, right? So, this kind of issues have come up very strongly. And then there's a conflict between the husband's parents and the wife. And this kind of conflicts come into family therapy. And there are things where strangely parents don't notice until the MCO, like the child's learning difficulty, right? You have a 7-year-old boy or sometimes an 8-year-old girl who still can't read, at that age. And it's kind of ignored because everybody is busy, you have a certain routine. But now that the MCO is happening and the child is learning from home, the parents no longer want to ignore these challenges. Yeah? So you have those kind of cases, and I think the incidences of things like depression or panic attacks has also increased. Because the normal network, this is more for individuals who stay on their own. Quite often when they are slightly restless, they run out and hang out with their friends in the mama shop. So those kind of support has also disappeared. So the problems generally are already there. So normally the first thing you do in therapy is you trace the history of the problem, and you'll find the history of the problem is 6-7 years. And the couples I got that have come in during the MCO, I always ask them, when does this problem start? And guess what they tell me? On average.
When you say problem, in the problem of the family or the children?
The marriage, right? So when couples come in, I always ask them, when did this problem first start, And they always identify a period which is 6 or 7 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 6 or 7 years ago. And that's a common trend. Actually, that's actually a global trend in therapy, right? So couples have problems for 6-7 years, and only after that they look for therapy. Because there's something in our nature that thinks the problem will disappear of its own. And after
And,
6-7 years, somebody has decided to leave the marriage, and then the other person says, "Let's try counseling."
so so
So
two
that's a
questions.
very long answer to a simple, almost simple question. But I think the problems are there. It just has become amplified during the episode.
No, I think it's so important that you give context, because the context is really important. Because I think there are a lot of things. There were so many nuggets that you actually gave, about couples being busy with work, being addicted to work. That that is, I don't know whether I should say that is a sign or that could be a sign, that we are avoiding dealing with real issues, right? So the issues have always been there, except that now you are facing it in a way that you cannot run away, and you don't have distraction. So two words that's coming to me is, we need to look for signs of being family members being distracted and not engaged in the family, right? And very often we hear complaints of, my children don't want to spend time with me. Even I do that. And unfortunately, as I ask the question and I put it out, it comes straight to my face, because I know that it is because I've not been spending time, right? So that they are getting distracted. And so I need to spend time going back and rebuilding the engagement with the kids, because they've got comfortable elsewhere. But I want to and I also like the thing that you said about couples, where you say, after 6-7 years, the issue has been there. But I think for me, the magic that you brought in is, at 6-7 years, we know there are problems, and there's usually reluctance to counseling, right? And you also said that when one person says, I'm going to leave, then the other person becomes more willing to try counseling, right? But I also deal with couples who will just hack it until the end of life, or until my children grow up, or just lead two lives. So I think in summary, and please correct me, is that I think we just need to, what I'm hearing is that we need to be ask ourselves whether we are paying attention to the relationships that we call family, right? And whether we are feeling engaged in the relationship, and whether people are feeling distracted. And if people are distracted and seem to be away from the family, then those are some signs for us to look out for. Having said
Yeah.
that, would it be a fair conclusion to say that we belong to families?
I think we belong to people. Yeah, it's a fair conclusion to say that. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the reason behind it is, if you look at the evolution of the human species, so you find that for 315,000 years, the Homo sapien, so that's how long we've been evolving. You're talking about 300,000 years of the brain doing the same thing. And what did the brain do? The brain told us that if we don't belong to a group, we will die. So basically, if you were born 100,000 years ago and you didn't belong to a group, either another tribe will kill you, or an animal will eat you up. So the brain has learned that you have to belong to a group. And the evidence to that is, today they do research, right, Malar? And if I were to stab you with a knife, and we did a brain scan, the part of your brain that gets activated is the exact same part that gets activated when you reject me. So the brain doesn't know the difference between an emotional rejection and a nail going into your feet. So, and the brain has evolved in this way because in order to keep you safe, you have to belong to a pack. So in essence, we are pack animals. See, the other thing that brain research shows us how much we are a pack animal is, they've done this experiment where they give an electric shock to a person, and then they see how much of the brain gets activated, right? And they have done the same experiment with a person alone, a couple where the relationship is not working, and then they give the couple counseling over 9 months, and then they again test it. Or a couple where their relationship is working. And what they found is, whenever someone you love is holding your hand, your brain doesn't register pain as much as registers when you're alone, right? So the brain itself as a tool and a device has developed to make us opt for relationship. So, quite often when you see someone in therapy and you look at the relationship around the person, you'll find a lot of failing relationships. And family therapy is really about activating the good relationships and mending some of the old relationships that are not working, right? That's really what family therapy is about. And just by doing that, you can cure depression without medicine. There's a lot of evidence of curing depression, anxiety, things that normally are medicated without medicine, because the family is a powerful healing unit. If you can get the family to function as a unit, you have the effect of healing on a person. That's why family therapy is very powerful, right? So yeah, families are in its own way a real, true, good hospital that heals. But having said that, I just want to also say another thing that's very important. All families are dysfunctional, so we cannot look for a perfect family. Yeah. So generally, if you look at any family, there's something that doesn't work in a family. Families that come into therapy are because this thing that doesn't work gets amplified. There's a certain event in the family life and things get amplified, right? So like a grandfather who's very significant for a family that doesn't have a father, and then the grandfather dies, and the family doesn't know how to mourn as a group because the grandfather used to hold them together. So those kind of strange incidences that happen bring families into therapy, right? So what I'm saying is, I don't want people to go away thinking there's something called a very functional family, or there's something called a perfect family. All families have problems. Yeah, but sometimes the problem gets so loud that there's a need for therapy.
Right. So what I'm hearing from you is, don't worry, if you look at your family, it doesn't look perfect because there's no such thing. But
Yeah.
having said that, yeah, so what you're saying is that so no such perfect family. I mean, we are imperfect people, so we can't possibly create perfect families, right? But within that, a sense of belonging and with our imperfection, when we come together, sometimes the environment, the space, the people who are in collectively, as human beings, we feel hurt. And what I really loved about what you said, and I'm going to repeat it because it's something that I want people to hear again, is that a lot of times we undermine the power of emotional wounds, right? Because a lot of times people say, oh, your husband doesn't beat you up, so why is she worried? Because she's not being beaten up, but he might be beating her up with words, right? So even parents, right? So we choose words, we don't realize how much it can hurt the family members, because words really, yeah, it's very painful. People don't get it, and I think you saying that is really important because you know because you're so clever, people will say, he's citing research. So listen, emotional wounds are as painful as anything that can be seen on the outside, says Darrel Lourdes. Okay.
Rejection. Yeah, I said that the part of the brain that gets activated is the same as the physical wound.
Yeah, so we are feeling the pain, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's it, because we, even in the corporate work that we do, there are bosses who say, I pay you, but I can throw books at you, I can call you names, I can call you stuff, right? I can degrade you, and they need to take responsibility for this, and which is why we need to hear these research, because this research is seldom cited in the corporate world, but we are also creating a lot of pain for people who come to make a living in the corporate world. So I'm just using this chance to tekan a little bit lah, huh? riding on your glory, okay? All right.
But what you said kind of brings me to beyond the words. Quite often when a family has problems, we say the Changi word that we use is the problem can be structural. Yeah. So see, I worked with this boy who was 25 years old, depressed, right? And the history of his problem is, see, his mother is a very strong character, And because she was so strong and powerful, the father started to live his life outside the house. So, fathers, become peripheral, in the process. And so what the mother did is she recruited the eldest son to now become the sort of man of the house and discipline the other siblings. Yeah. So this guy is 25 years old, and a sibling disciplining another sibling, especially physically, ruptures relationships, right? So his siblings hate him. And he's 25, good-looking guy, never had a girlfriend because his mother is almost married to him, right? So the structure of the family has gone wrong, where the son is now the father, and the brother is now the father of the brothers, right? So sometimes within a family setting, quite often what we do in therapy is we adjust the structures. So it's not words that has hurt this family, but how the family has organized itself that is hurting the family.
Right.
And this guy during the therapy session, he needed to hear his father tell him that you don't have to be the father of the family. I am the father of the family, And 2 weeks after he heard the father say that, when he came back for therapy, he looked different. It's almost like a cloud had lifted. And in the individual therapy that I did with him, he was very aware that he's not the father of the family and he was playing the role. But sometimes it's very hard to let it go until you hear the person who's really responsible say, look, son, you be a son, and I will focus on being the father of this family. And that was the healing process for them. And what was interesting is after that, he was able to focus on his own life, his own career, his own relationship. And he was able to differentiate, which is another big time word, right? So this idea that we grow away from our family and become our own self was also important. So, I think when we look at families that are in trouble, wounding each other with words is one part of it, yeah. But sometimes the structural dimensions cause a lot more havoc in the family system, yeah. And the wrong structure sometimes causes the wounding to happen. And when you correct the structure within the family, you find the wounding disappears.
Right. So, Darrel, I asked you a short question, you give me such long answer. Okay, which is very good. I love it. But now, because you are giving me long answers, I'm going to ask you, can you extend your time a little bit more today until 1:30,
yeah.
please? Okay?
Yeah. Sure. Yes. Until what time, brother?
Supposed to be 1, but no, it's your fault. You have to take responsibility. You're giving me long answers. I have a lot of questions. You have to say yes to me, okay?
Okay, we finished some of the questions. Go on.
Okay. So, but thanks. No, but the thing is this, when you answer, I have more questions. Otherwise, I can't sleep, right? So you said two very important things. One is the structure, right? Which is really, I think, and that story was so moving because, a lot of times in very extreme dysfunctional families, right, where and that's what the topic is all about today. Finally, we're coming to the topic, right? Absent fathers and enmeshed mothers, right?
Yeah. So that was an example of an absent father and enmeshed mother.
Yeah, so so now we had the topic in mind, but Darrel always takes you elsewhere where you need to go. So absent fathers, it's clear, but I want to ask you a bit about enmeshed mothers. But before we do that, so what is a family structure in today's world?
So there's no prescribed family structure. If the structure works for you, then it's fine.
Okay.
I always tell people, don't look for problems if there's none.
Okay.
If things are functional, everybody is more or less happy. Occasionally you have your fight. That's a normal family,
Okay.
And there's no prescribed structure. And in today's world, there's a lot of alternative structures that are emerging. Yeah, so you have, now you have about 20 years of research on children that are brought up by gay couples. Yeah, and I don't know what's the orientation of your audience, but they are finding that as long as the couple was loving to each other, the children are very functional. And not necessarily they become gays, they follow what is their own persuasion. And from a psychological standpoint, they are actually sometimes more functional than children that grew up in a family where mom and dad hates each other, right? So the what is the correct structure for a family can't be answered.
Okay.
And sometimes you have situations where the father has died and the eldest child steps up, and it's very functional, no? So the earlier example I gave you where the elder child stepped up, it became dysfunctional. But there's also stories of elder child stepping up and the family is functional. Yeah, so there is no prescribed way of setting up a family. When you see pathological conditions, like if the child gets into alcohol or someone is into drugs or there's depression, there's a lot of anxiety, you have bulimia, schizophrenia, then you already know something is wrong. Yeah.
Right.
But you don't have to wait that long. You'll have signs that something is wrong a lot earlier. And pick up the signs and do something with it.
Again, going back to, if we know there's presence, there's happiness, right? People are happy, feeling a sense of belonging, then don't go and look for trouble. But if there are signs, then if you're distracted, you will also not be able to look at it. Is what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So and I also agree with you, because I personally meet a lot of people where people come from difficult backgrounds and they take on additional responsibility, and that's what shapes them very differently, and they find meaning in it, right? But there are also people at some point of time, because they're not listening to themselves, that they may have restlessness, but it shows up much later because they didn't listen to it earlier. Right. So I think there's a lot of just connecting within, knowing what you're feeling and what's coming through, and just listening within and to the people you love is what I'm getting. You spoke about identity. So I have 3 kids, right? So what's your take on identity? So how I don't know about other parents, but Asian parents or maybe Indian parents, I don't know. We take a lot of pride in, oh, my kids are like me. So when children are displaying strength, they are like you, and when they're displaying weakness, they are like your partner. So, or mother-in-law. That we make all of those comparisons, and I'm very conscious. I'm very, very conscious about not doing that with my kids. So when my kids are like, "Oh, do I look like you? Do I look like you?" I say, "Can you just look like yourself?" Because I just want to be me, right? I don't like competition. That's more like it, right? So what's the take in terms of when we have our own identity, right? How does that look like, sound like, and as parents, how should we be thinking about having a secured identity or whatever? How do you name
that? So the word enmeshed, I think that's a good word to start with.
Good. Let's go.
Coming back to your topic. So I'm working with a girl who's 30 and 31, yeah. And, she is very depressed, and, she is thinking of ending her life, right? So that's the scenario. When you kind of trace back to what happened in her life, you find that, she has a very tense relationship with her mother. Yeah? And the mother never approved of her, but she seems to have approved of the other siblings more. Yeah, and she grew up in this home where she's always criticized, but she became an outstanding student, did really well in everything, right? And as a small child, you're powerless, and you want the approval of your parents. So you fight very, very, very hard in order to win that approval. But what is happening is she's now 30 years old and she's still fighting for approval. And that gets heavy and tiring after some time. So that's a clear example of how your identity is already enmeshed. So she hasn't formed her own identity, right? So a key part in therapy was the day I told her, why do you still need the approval? You're no longer a child, right? You're a woman. You need to decide what is right and wrong for you. Yeah? You need to become who you want to be. And if your mom can accept you, that's great. If she can't, too bad, no? And in therapy, quite often we ask this question, are you 30 years old or are you 13 years old, right? It's a very real question. Yeah? So if you get stuck somewhere, then you become enmeshed. So enmeshment is when you're stuck somewhere in the past. Yeah. And when you can't form your identity in a healthy way, that's when problems happen. So the question is, what does it mean to form my identity, right? And you talked about it in the context of parents. So what is really important for a person is to be able to say, this is the parts of my mom that I like, and this is the parts of my mom that I don't like. And I will emulate the parts of my mom that I like, and I will consciously reject the parts that I don't like. You know, that doesn't mean I don't love my mom, but she's an imperfect person. She has things that are good and bad, and I'll take all that is good and I'll let go of all that is bad, right? And you do the same with your father, right? You know, these are the parts of my father that I like, and I'll take it. And these are parts of my father that I don't like. But what you're doing is, enmeshment is when two identities are together. So when you do that exercise, you're starting to separate. No? You're going apart, and you're looking at your parents separately, and you're forming your own identity. And that's really what's important, forming my own identity. And it doesn't matter what identity I form, as long as I'm choosing it for myself, and then I try to live that identity. So yeah, if you look like your mom, okay, that's okay, you know, but you must say, I'm proud of it, I want it, right? And take it on. Yeah, so the idea is differentiate. The word is differentiate, you know. The psychological term that we use is try to differentiate from your family of origin and become who you are. Do you know one of the biggest conflicts in couples is they don't differentiate from their family of origin. So husband wants to replicate a messy household because he grew up in a messy household. Wife's household is very neat and she wants to replicate her household. Yeah. So the first conflicts the couple get into is they don't differentiate, they don't separate, right? So they want to continue with the identity that is there in the past. And successful couples are those who say, look, what was good in your history and background and what was good in mine, and we'll put it together and make a third kind of identity for this family. And those are kind of couples that thrive, you know, because they are kind of discerning and choosing consciously and building a new identity for themselves. Yeah, so this identity question is a very important one for health, mental health. Yeah. Again, a long answer for a short question.
I love your long answers, and you're kind. You've given me more of your time, so I'm not going to complain. So one of those things that, by the way, maybe I should make you also. I should ask you for another commitment since you're on air. You will come back again when we call you, right?
Yes. Yeah, sure.
Okay, so
this has been fun.
It's 1:30 and he said he's coming again. So if any questions don't get answered, don't worry, keep it coming so that we can call him again quickly. All right, that was an advertisement for you. Now, see, one of those things that I find in the conversations, in the support conversations, in the support groups I'm in, whether it's me or other people, is that I find that one of those things we struggle with is, if I'm having difficulty in a relationship, especially with my parents, right? And I'm talking to you as a friend, not as a therapist. Imagine you as a normal person, okay? You're not normal, right? So, and one of the reactions that I find, both parties get into is the idea of guilt, because if my someone has said something hurtful to me, I'm talking to a friend, so I had a quarrel with my mom, so I'm talking to my friend, and I find that we tend to have this tendency to immediately go and protect. So if I'm complaining about my mom, I need to quickly protect her identity because I'm sharing her weakness, or the other person tries to do that, but she's still your mom, he's still your dad, right? So and the reason I bring this up is that I see that whenever these conversation happens, on one hand we tell people, come and talk to me, right? On the other hand, when they're expressing their pain, we're almost not giving them permission to express their pain, because they're not saying that this person is bad. They're just saying, I'm having a bad experience, right? And I find that often in the so-called support groups that has like There are just so many support groups, especially with women. I'm not with the
Sorry,
men.
sorry. Before you go on, in that example that you just shared, right? What is the word that you'll use to describe that? I come and tell you something, and you tell me, no, 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 you shouldn't be thinking that way. What has just happened in that exchange?
What I'm not sure. So ask me one more time.
So
Okay.
you're saying
telling
you go and talk to your friend about your mom, and you start
Okay.
complaining about her, and your friend says, no, no, you shouldn't be thinking that way.
Right.
Your mom is a good person, or whatever the case is, right?
Right.
You know, that interaction, what do you call it? No?
What interaction?
That interaction that as you just described, what word would you use to call it? How would you describe that?
No, if
This is very important one, you know.
Okay. So now,
It
so now I need to put myself in that position to answer it. Okay.
yeah.
So when I have friends who do that for me, I take a step back because suddenly I find people moralizing what I'm feeling, right?
Okay.
And so for me, that automatically I put on my brakes and say, I can't talk to you because that's not where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So for me,
the word you use is you have been invalidated.
Correct.
Yeah, you've been invalidated and you step back. So I think the rule you want to set with friends when you share is you're only allowed to paraphrase and be curious. And I think that in itself takes you very far. Right? So, so your mother was mean to you, I paraphrase. And then I ask a question to deepen the story. Now, that kind of conversations are therapeutic.
Nice.
And you go as deep as you can with the person. But these are not usual conversations, but you can always ask someone to just be curious and validate me. And when you paraphrase what has been said, you get validated. And when you ask a question out of curiosity, you get validated. Normally, when we go to someone with pain, we are feeling invalidated. Right? So if the person responds to your invalidation with invalidation, then that's the end. Yeah. So the support groups that you have to be very aware of this idea of what is validation and what is invalidation. And the solutions are not so important sometimes. People are resourceful enough to find their own solutions,
Right.
As long as I validate and I take you to a deeper place than when the conversation started.
And validation here means listening.
Validation is more than listening. Listening itself, if we ran a workshop, there's 7 or 8 skills connected to listening, right? So, it's actually a complex area, right? So when I listen to you and I play back what I thought I heard from you, that's a form of validation. And when you're telling your story, I notice the emotional state you're in. And I say, Malar, as you're talking about that story, you're feeling angry. Is that correct? Now, that is a more powerful form of validation. Yeah? And then when I ask a question that allows you to develop your story even more, that's again a more powerful form of validation. So validation has many dimensions, right? So if you use I identify what emotion you're feeling, I paraphrase your story, I ask you a question that helps you dig even deeper. Now that is real validation. Right? So it's important to kind of find friends who can do that for you. And nice. If you have a team of people you're coaching, then coach the team to do those things. And then the team becomes a place of reflection and healing.
Thank you. You have just done a mini module on emotional intelligence, Darrel. Thank you so much. Looks like after people listen to this video, I'm not going to get more work, but never mind. But I think there's such a powerful point on validation and the different levels of listening that you brought in. So thank you very much for that. And now people will know why Darrel can be scary, even though Shamini Sudhan says you're not scary. Do you know Shamini? Singapore.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. So she says you're not scary. Now, so I'm going to just throw some questions that's come up so that people are more forgiving. Alia Karen asked, in HR, you were dealing with people, now again with people. Do you enjoy the people or the counseling? Are you ever tired? Okay. That's not how she sounded, but I'm just reading it that way to dramatize.
I think the HR job is a very different job from the counseling job. So, when you're HR director, your focus is on getting the task done. So the focus is, you're dealing with people, but you still need to deliver the new salary. You need to deliver the recruitment numbers. You need to deliver the case that is in court that is favorable to the company. Yeah, so the focus is really on delivery, but you happen to be the expert on people. Yeah, and you're supposed to coach the leadership team on how to deal with people. But the task is really important, and you run things using a Gantt chart. Yeah, but in therapy, there's no Gantt chart, right? You can only follow the speed of the family. You can only follow the speed of the couple. You can only follow the speed of the individual person who's sitting in front of you. So Gantt charts are out the window. Uh, you're not trying to deliver a task. You're trying to help people heal. So sometimes sitting in silence for a really long time in the room with the person who's hurting is the delivery. So what is needed from both the professions are completely different, I would say. A successful HR person may not be a successful counselor, and a successful counselor may not make a very good HR person also, because what you're looking for is slightly different. And I think it's especially corporate settings like Intel and Shell, the task orientation is very high. The idea of delivery is very high. Whereas in counseling, your orientation is towards validation, looking for resources the person has, helping them leverage the resources they already have, regressing them back to a moment when they were hurt and the trauma is trapped, and releasing the trauma. This is a very different sorts of stuff that you need to know. But yeah, it's true, you're dealing with people. At a superficial level, it's all connected to people, but on a day-to-day basis, it's very different as jobs. But I would say the HR job has helped me, because good therapy sometimes is to tell a client that they're full of shit. And if they're taking you for a ride, you need to be able to call it out and say, hey, look, you're taking me for a ride. And I think if I didn't have those 20-something years of Intel and Shell, working at a senior level, I don't think I'll be brave enough to tell someone that they're full of shit in therapy, and that is needed also for the healing process.
Sure.
Because they know the person who's sitting in front of them is authentic, cannot be manipulated, and cares for them enough to say, this is bullshit. So yeah, that's where it kind of marries together. And in family therapy, in a sense, when you're coaching a leadership team, you want the team to come together and be motivated to move in a certain direction. So when you have a family in a room, you want them to come together and be motivated also to move in a certain direction. So, in that sense, the basic principle of leadership coaching is there in family therapy, but just the tools are very different. And your assessment is also very different. Yeah.
Because you're measuring people on different things. So what I'm hearing from you is it sounds to me like you have found how to marry the skills from the both areas, right?
Yeah.
You have found it, number one. Number two is I really think you're working with the soul of the person.
Yeah. And in the corporate setting, if someone doesn't perform, you can sack them. As a parent, you can't tell your son, okay, you're sacked, I'm going to hire a new son. Yeah? I'm going to go on the internet and look for a new son, a 17-year-old boy who's better than you, right? You can't do that. You have to figure out how to work with that son that is 17 that's giving you problems. So the rules are all quite different in that sense.
Thank you. Next question. Are you ready? This is an easy one now. How do you enroll people to go through family therapy? I feel there's a lot of barriers still between family members. This is asked by my dear friend Maziana.
Normally the child that seems to have the struggle is the one who recruits the family into therapy, right? So I had this 11-year-old girl who cut her wrist, right, with a kitchen knife, and the mother managed to stop her on time. And when they come into therapy, you interview the family, and when you interview the girl, she says, "Look, these people fight every time. As long as I remember, they have been fighting." And 11-year-old girl can't take the knife and stab the mother or the father, right? The only person she can hurt is herself. Yeah. So what normally happens in family therapy is the child shows symptoms that make the parents scared, and then the family comes in. Yeah, and that's where the motivation is. Yeah, and no matter how problematic a couple may be, they always love their children. Hardly do you meet a family, even if the father is absent or the mother is very negative, at the end of the day, at the core, they still love their children, right? So the children are a powerful motivator that brings families into therapy. So I would say 80% of the families we see is because the children have brought them into therapy. Not literally brought them, but because they want to help the child, they come into therapy. And then in some cases, the parents are motivated, right? So, you have a daughter that is becoming very distant from the father. The father feels hurt enough to come in. And so he brings in the family, or a mother who feels she's kind of losing her son, no, who doesn't want to interact with her. And then they come in for therapy. So sometimes the parents do come in also for therapy. But this question of motivation is a tough one, and I think, knowing that, families who are suffering, what they need to know is they don't have to keep suffering. There's help, and if they know there's help, they would tend to reach out, So I think if the people who are listening can get the message out, if you know families who are suffering, family therapy is very new in Malaysia. People hardly talk about it. I didn't even know about it until I started studying counseling, right? And if you notice a family that's suffering, and to tell them, look, there's a solution. When a car is kind of giving you trouble, to take it to a mechanic. So it's the same way, if a family is giving you trouble, then take it to a mechanic, and let the mechanic alleviate some of the pain and help the family find their own resources to fix their problem.
So how do we know who's the right mechanic for our problem? How do we find the right therapist? Because I think that has been my personal struggle in terms of, because when you're having a conversation is one thing, right? But, finding the right match. So what would be like a very quick tip that you can give? So if someone is looking for a therapist and they're meeting the therapist for the first time, and deciding, am I going to talk to Darrel or not? Is Darrel my guy? How do people decide on that?
Request to have a 15 minutes chat with the
Okay.
potential therapist on the phone, right? I think that is, and if the therapist doesn't want to invest 15 minutes to chat on you, then you already know it's the wrong therapist.
Nice. Nice.
Or they are just too busy and occupied. This is also fair, right? So some people are, their schedules are so full, they have not much time for these things, and that's okay, right? So if you make a request for a 15 minutes conversation, and then at the end of the 15 minutes, you check and see whether you feel safe and there's chemistry, right? Most important is, do you feel safe with this person? Can you trust this person, right? And then what we also do in our center is, after the first session, we tell the client, if the chemistry works, schedule the next appointment, right? So you leave it to the client to take the initiative to schedule, right? And I think that should be the attitude also. I think there's nothing wrong terminating the session after the first session, because you find that there's no chemistry with the therapist. Yeah. So if your intuition is struggling, you kind of are okay but not really convinced, then
Mm.
maybe that person is not for you. It's very important to have a very strong, research says that the biggest healing factor is the relationship between the therapist and the client, not the
Mm.
technique, not the school of thought, but just the connection works. And somehow
Mm.
that connection in itself is healing and is able to take the clients to the next place. So if you find the chemistry is bad, don't don't work with the therapist.
Nice. Good advice. Thank you very much. So, feeling safe and, finding your chemistry. Yeah. All right. I have 5 more minutes of your golden time. So you need to shoot this really. And you have to answer this guy, Parth Singh, very famous guy. And he doesn't want my opinion. Is there a situation where one finds his or her authentic self, but only to find that it's not in line with general good or norms? Perhaps it's dark to some extent.
Hmm. I I'm not.
But Paul, he's
I
not
think
laughing at you.
yeah, no. So one of the basic tensions within all of us is the need to be ourselves and the need to belong. And I
Mm,
think to some extent, Pratipal is talking about, you know, sometimes in my need to be myself, I lose
mm,
my sense of belonging, you know,
mm, mm,
and
mm.
sometimes in my sense of belonging, I lose myself.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
yeah, yeah.
there's that, and I think there's no easy answer for this.
Mm,
The tension of belonging and being self follows us throughout our life. From the time we are 9 years old, it starts to appear.
mm,
Yeah, because at 9, you kind of discover that your identity is not really your parents' identity. Until 8 or 9 years old, children take the parents' identity.
yeah.
So then, as the identity starts to form, you find a need to separate, to
Mm,
find who you are.
mm,
Yet you still need to belong to the family. Yeah, and throughout life, even when you're married with the kids,
mm,
you want to belong to the family. Yet you need your own time.
mm,
Do your own things. And when doing your own thing starts damaging your other relationships, then it's time to evaluate that. So,
mm.
I think there's no easy answer. It's a constant reflection and adjustment to find where we are. This is one of those normal human tensions, natural tensions that people struggle with. And where you land depends on a judgment call.
Sure.
So I don't know whether I answered the question, but I think it's a very tough one to struggle
Yeah,
with.
I mean, I think what you're basically saying is that we need to acknowledge the need that we want the freedom to be ourselves, to own ourselves, right? At the same time, we can't exist on our own. We need relationships, so we need a sense of belonging, and all the time, you need to find the right balance that works for you. And when one is affected, the other one will be affected. So I think it's a lot of yeah. He says it's a brilliant answer, so I'm off the hook. Thank you very much. But what you're saying is, if I don't know myself and I don't know how this relationship matters to me, so the difficulty is finding that balance that only the individual will know what is important for
Yeah.
himself or herself, right? Yeah.
And also,
Okay.
yourself is changing, right? The self that was 16 is different from the self that's 26, and the self that's 36 is different. So, where is the balance is going to be different, right? So, today I'm very happy with a very small, tiny group of friends. I
Mm,
wasn't that way in my 20s, you know.
mm,
So, my sense of the circle that I want to belong to is tiny, you know.
mm, mm.
And yeah, so it kind of keeps evolving, no? Maybe 10
Yeah.
years from now, I'll want a bigger circle. Then we need to do some compromise. Yeah.
And so we change, and we just need to make sure we're keeping in touch with our own change to know what's happening internally, so that as we evolve and we understand the change that's happening, we also are open to our needs and stay true to ourselves, to
Yeah.
the identity in that stage of life. All right. And I think your messages has been consistent. I have 2 more questions, which I'm not going to ask you because there's no way you can answer this in 5 minutes. No way. But I'm just going to, I think this is Carl. I'm just reading it to you. I'm not expecting you to answer because I think you can respond to it on the comments later, because I think it is really complicated, right? The question that's asked: what would be the most effective way to treat a suicide case with those relatives who are facing grief? It's a big question. And what is the experience of adults who participate in a suicide bereavement group? Does the suicide group support group help? So it's to do with suicide, grief. So it's a deep subject. So I don't want to. I think it's not fair for me to give you a short time to answer this. We'll just need to bring you back again, Darrel, because I want to ask you some rapid fire questions.
Okay, go ahead.
You look like okay, So, but otherwise, we've actually handled all the questions that came through. Really, very many questions. So, for those who are still with us, thank you very much. I just need to do this 5-minute thing with Darrel, because offline he won't entertain me this way. He's only very polite here. Okay. Yeah, yes. I need to use my 5 minutes. Okay. Now, so our series is called "Being Whole, Being Me," right? And which is why the work that you do is so close to my heart. So you just need to help me finish the sentence in your own way, lah. Being whole means
Being whole means, I think peace is a sign that you're whole. So for me, I think for being whole is when I'm at peace, I feel I'm whole.
nice. Thank you. I'm saying thank you because I feel validated. The superpower of mine in family therapy is.
My superpower is Endorphy, Professor Endorphy, who I met in 2017, who continues to be a mentor. Our center is named after him, Endorphy Family Therapy Center. So yeah,
Nice.
He's my superpower. Yeah.
You need to check him out. And so you will find the video on Endorphy after this. And so you know where to contact Darrel, and you can go and read more about it. But he has.
I have an offer for you, Mala. If you have enough people who want to come together, and I can get Endorphy to do a session, Professor Endorphy, to talk about mental health with people. We can run a workshop or something at some point. He comes to Malaysia. Before the pandemic, he used to come to Malaysia at least once a year. Yeah, so he runs a diploma program for a bunch of psychiatrists in Malaysia. And as soon as the pandemic is over, he'll be here to do face-to-face work. We can always organize our own side workshop and do something. Yeah, okay.
All right. So what is a number that you're looking for?
He likes small numbers. So, do personal work.
Small, what's the number?
Yeah, about maybe 20 people who want to do some workshop, some inner work,
So for those who are watching this, and if you want to do inner work, you can PM me or put a yes here so that we can keep you in the database so that we can make Darrel's dream come true. Okay. I know this has been your dream for a long time. From the first time I met you, you had mentioned this. Okay. One misunderstanding about family therapy.
One misunderstanding about family therapy is probably the families that come in for therapy have big issues. I think that's a misunderstanding, because what I said earlier, all families have challenges, except some families at a certain time has the challenge amplified. And that's why they come into therapy. So
thank you.
There's no stigma. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you. What keeps me going?
Oh, the clients. The clients keep me going, facing them, helping, figuring out what to do next. And sometimes when you're stuck, that's when the biggest learnings come in. I think the clients are the ones that keep me going.
Nice. Oh, you're giving me all these nice, sweet answers. My goodness. Last one.
Besides my children, of course. Besides my 3 boys.
We need to look out for your 3 boys, and especially those who have daughters. Okay, but never mind. That's on the side. When families are healed.
You can feel it in the room. There's no need for words. When a certain moment has happened in therapy, it's so obvious. Just the silence sometimes speaks to you. The expression in the face speaks to you. You cannot mistake the important moment of healing in the family. But what is really more important is actually the real therapy happens outside the therapy when they're at home. Yeah, so the sessions are catalysts, but the real therapy is at home.
Darrel Lourdes, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for, I mean, really precious time. Even though you've said you'll come again, but I think the last 1.5 hours has really been. I don't know about for how is it for the audience, but for me, it's been amazing as it always is when I'm spending time with you. But it's usually more scary off screen, like because you're looking in your eyes and you're asking me those questions and you're looking through my emotions, right? So thank you for saying yes. Thank you for offering the services of your team in Endorphi to create more awareness in the areas that really matters for us right now where we belong. So thank you very much for all those who are listening in. If you've got something out of this session and you want to give us some feedback, this is the time for you to post the feedback. Please share it with your friends, get people to know what Darrel and his team in Endorphi are doing, because I think that's one way we can actually spread the word and make the world that we live a better place, healing one individual, one family, and one community at a time. So thank you, Darrel, for your time, and you can be assured that we'll be calling you again. Thank you.
Thanks, Mala. Very enjoyable. Yeah.
You enjoyed it. Okay, I got it. Right. Thank you for all those who've joined us. I know we've gone past 1:30, but I hope it was worth it. So thanks for your time. I hope this was useful. Please share it with people where you know that we can heal relationships. As we do that, signing off, this is Malar from Hearts and Minds. Next week, we have another Darrel who is really different from this Darrel, who is going to, I call him the serial entrepreneur, who's going to share his part of his life and his growth and where he is today. So signing off now. Hope to sign in with you again and reconnect again next week, same time at 12 o'clock. I will see you. Till then, stay safe, get vaccinated if you can, and be kind to yourself. Take care. Bye.